And welcome to this Wednesday edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForrest. Very happy to have you guys with us. I would imagine there'll be betting action on this at some point, and there probably has been in the past. I don't know how long you've been hanging on to your ticket. Maybe you've already torn them up thinking it was impossible after Pete Rose checked out. But two debates that, as a sportscaster, primarily here in South Florida, but also around the country, that I was hoping I would never have to get into again. One was a local issue, as there was a big debate on sports talk radio for many years. I guess you had these in other cities as well. I would imagine pretty common. I remember when I was in L.A., there was a big debate back in the 70s. Who's the better shortstop, Dave Concepcion of the Big Red Machine or Bill Russell of the Los Angeles Dodgers? Now, that seemed to be a non-debatable issue. Concepcion was a vastly superior hitter, and I don't know that he took a back seat as a fielder. He was an exciting fielder. Bill Russell was a very efficient guy, but kind of a no power, 279 type of hitter. And while he was part of a great infield for the Los Angeles Dodgers, who were a championship caliber team at the time, went to a couple of World Series. I believe they won two during that span. But there was no chance that he was. I mean, if you were choosing sides and you had a chance to get Dave Concepcion over Bill Russell, an easy pick every single time. In South Florida, of course, it was a football debate. Who's the better quarterback, Marino or Montana? Now, we loved Danny Boy. I mean, watching him throw the rock, especially used to cover games and be on the roof of the antiquated Orange Bowl, which was quite a dump of a facility, but it had some kind of serendipitous charm to it as far as the Dolphins went, and they haven't nearly been as successful since they left the Orange Bowl. Now, a lot of that is due to inept management and the fact that they've drafted poorly and been run by what a lot of people consider to be a bunch of bozos, a bunch of clowns. But there was a mystique about the Orange Bowl. And when we were up on the rooftop there watching Danny throw the ball against the Chicago Bears that year in 1985 when the Bears came in undefeated and they beat them, you would have to say that there was a serious lean towards Dan Marino being a better quarterback. And then we never had any answer, though, to the argument. And I'd imagine people around the country probably subscribe to this theory. Well, what about the rings? And then you get into another subsequent debate about whether or not was Ernie Banks a great player? Of course he was, but he never won a championship. There are many that fall into that category. And so I don't know that it has to be a barometer of greatness, a measurement of upper level stature in a sport where a lot of people are great, but only a certain number fall into that elite company. I don't know that it disqualifies Marino from being in that discussion, but I would also figure that if you went around the country and spanned, and polled a bunch of people almost unanimously, people would say Joe Montana because he's got the 4 rings. So, and Tom Brady, is he the greatest of all time because he has more Super Bowl rings than anybody else? You could give him that accordance, but I'm not sure that I subscribe fully to that theory just because there are any number of players that never were in the winner's circle when the championships were being decided. And you couldn't dispute that they were top caliber players that, had they been in different circumstances, probably would have had multiple titles as well. So that was one debate that I hated. But the other one, and there was no answer to it. I mean, you weren't going to satisfy anybody, whichever way you went. And the other one that was common, and it popped up again, is Pete Rose, does he belong in the Hall of Fame? Now, we all know the story. He was betting on baseball. Damages the integrity of the game. I remember when I first was trying to get started and I was doing some interviews to generate some writing samples so I could get a job with a newspaper somewhere. I interviewed a longtime, venerable, old-school, salty dog baseball guy named Harry Dalton, who at the time was the general manager of the California Angels, and he had been very successful and was somewhat of a legendary executive in sports. I don't know if he was Branch Rickey, but Harry Dalton, very successful with the Baltimore Orioles before he came to the California Angels, where he didn't do a terrible job, but they didn't have the infield that the Dodgers did in the 70s, and no matter what they did in free agency, they still weren't able to crack through and win that coveted title. But Dalton said to me, hey, listen, we're selling a pennant race. This is how we're marketing the game, and we have to be above reproach. People have to believe. This was before betting had taken off to, I don't know that anybody could have imagined it would be what it is today. But he said, people have to believe that the game is on the level. And I would imagine that that's true. Now, a lot of you guys that have losing tickets from last night are probably implying, well, you know what, that's Scott Foster. I tell you what, he's got to be getting paid off by the Gambino crime family to make these calls. They're atrocious. And you might want to believe that. I would like to believe that games are being contested on the level. Well, we've seen many examples now with the explosion, the exponential increase in interest in sports wagering that there have been many, many examples of where the integrity of the game was not only clearly in question, but it was being severely abused. Tim Donaghy being an example. He's winking at the Gambino family, the referee in basketball, saying, don't worry, you're going to get your over. I'm going to put this guy on his stripes 6 times in the last 3 minutes, even if he doesn't get touched. Kind of the Jalen Brunson thing where he falls backwards and goes ahead and gets the whistle. But Donaghy was, he had a quick whistle there. I think he would be the first to admit it. And so, yeah, the integrity of the game very much in question. Did Pete Rose damage the integrity of the game by betting on baseball? Yeah, you would have to say it reeks, it smacks of impropriety. Is it enough to keep him permanently, lifetime banned from the game? Or is there some point in time, guys that murdered somebody in cold blood do 20, 25 years in prison, and then they get out and they try to have some kind of metamorphosis and turn their lives around on some occasions? Sometimes they're right back there in a slammer. Would Pete Rose have been inclined to continue to bet on baseball? Look, he was a stone degenerate. I don't know that he could help himself. Should that lifetime ban have been upheld even after he was out of the game for how many years? When Bart Giamatti, the commissioner of baseball at the time, first issued the lifetime suspension, I always suspected that there was a wink-wink arrangement between Bart Giamatti and Pete Rose that, listen, Pete, we don't want to go any deeper into this. We know you did it. We had this guy, John Dow, do the investigation, and the facts are there. Clear-cut evidence. I mean, your fingerprint is on all of these tickets. And we know you were making bets. We don't know that you were doing things deliberately to influence the outcome of games, but we know you were betting on the games, and that's enough for us to say we can't have this. We have to have people believe the game is on the level. So Pete, I think, had an agreement there with Giamatti that this was going to be maybe a 1 to 5 year period of time that he was going to have to sit out. And remember when that ruling first was established, I believe there was a condition that he could apply for reinstatement after 1 year. And I wouldn't have been surprised if he had been reinstated after 1 year and just sat it out quietly. It didn't do anything particularly damaging. There have been other assertions about Pete that are not particularly flattering about having affairs with 14-year-old girls and all this other stuff. I don't know that any of that is true or false, but the baseball issue was enough for the suspension to be valid. And yet, from a credential standpoint, there's no denying that Pete Rose was one of the greatest baseball players of all-time hits leader, Charlie Hustle. He epitomized everything that you were looking for, the head-first slide, the fact that he was all out and buried a catcher, Fosse, in the All-Star game. These are the kind of characteristics you would want any player on your team to exhibit on a consistent basis. Who wants to see a guy posing at home plate when he hits a high fly ball? And I'm hearing John Sterling in my head right now. It is high, it is far, it is caught by the second baseman. But how many times have you seen it where a ball looks like it's gone, the guy's posing at home plate, beating his chest and flipping his bat, and then it bounces off the wall at Fenway, and he's stuck with a single? It happens all the time. So you would want your ball players to go ahead and exhibit the kind of characteristics that Pete Rose did as a player. Did it establish him as having Hall of Fame credentials without any smidgen of a doubt? But does the ban hold up? I think if Bart Giamatti had not checked out, Rose would have been back in the game. He would have been in the Hall of Fame. Fay Vincent had a hard-on for him, didn't care for Pete Rose, his character at all, type of person that he was, and he was staunch and adamant about the idea that this wasn't going to happen in his lifetime. So he is no longer in charge of baseball, and there have been various other. You have Rob Manfred in there now, seem to be lenient towards the idea of at least considering reinstating Pete Rose, which he did last night. Do you have to be dead to be in the Hall of Fame? It would have been nice if he had considered this. Pete Rose had petitioned various commissioners for reinstatement, and all of them said, no way, Jose. And so now, all of a sudden, it's a big issue out there, a big debate, whether or not Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame posthumously. I would conjecture this, too, and having known Pete a little bit on a very casual basis, but he was around South Florida where we live a lot, and we saw him at various events. Of course, you always saw him at the track with a stack of hundreds on the table and thinking, wow, this guy really is out of control. But if you have the money, you could do what you want with it. And if you're losing it in vast sums while you're betting on slow horses, so be it. I mean, he had enough from these card signing shows and autograph sessions and appearances that he was probably generating a fairly substantial living. It might have even been in excess of what he could have made were he in the game. Although, if he was a manager or some kind of coach, I would imagine the salaries might have been a lot easier to achieve than going to 1,000 card shows and having a bunch of snot-nosed little kids going up and saying, "Hey, Pete, can you sign this? $250." Made a lot of money off that, though. And I don't know that anybody that wasn't in the Hall of Fame, or even guys that were, I mean, do you hear people talking about Double X, Jimmy Fox? Do you hear them talking about Lou Gehrig all the time? But every time the induction subject comes up and the voting and the possible eligible inductees are listed, you hear Pete Rose and the whole Pete Rose debate over and over again. I think he probably benefited more from not being in the Hall of Fame as much as he would have loved the distinction and being accorded that type of a title. Maybe he would have been able to charge more for these shows if he was a Hall of Famer, but I don't think so. So he did benefit greatly. I don't know if there'll be a betting line on it. I would imagine posthumously, what happens, people? Did they finally relent and put him in there? Baseball, of course, was a sport that started the whole hideous nature of putting an asterisk in the record book or as a designation of the fact that there was something different about this, which you might have in this same debate about the Triple Crown, where the people in thoroughbred racing are reluctant to change the series, and yet it's already compromised a number of times the chances of having a Triple Crown winner because Preakness pops up too quickly by modern standards, for sure, in the schedule of racing these 3-year-old horses, to the point where if you really are protective of the best interest of the horse can't make that decision. But you have a guy like Bill Mott who has sovereignty win the Kentucky Derby and almost immediately says, no Preakness, 2 weeks is too soon to run this horse back. And who would know better the characteristics of these horses than the guys that train them and work with them every day? So if he's not willing to risk it for the glory and all of the capital that would be generated by winning the second leg of the Triple Crown, he immediately said, no, I'm not doing it. It comes up too quickly. So it's time for a change there. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I don't know why these sports are so reluctant to change something as simple as maybe spacing out the 3 Triple Crown races so they're a month apart. What would it hurt if the Preakness was 3 weeks, which would be a more common starting point for most of these horses? Come back after a race at 1.25 miles over a difficult surface in a field of 19. But would that kill anything if the Preakness was run 3 weeks later? Most people feel it's Naira and the people behind the Belmont Stakes that don't want to change because they like the position they're in 5 weeks after the Derby. And so the Preakness is kind of the redheaded stepchild. Now, what would it damage the integrity of previous Triple Crown winners to have a Triple Crown occur where the horse had more time to rest? Look, there are oddball situations, not necessarily routinely, but where's the Belmont going to be run this year? At Saratoga. What's the distance going to be? Not 1.5 miles, arduous test of a champion, but at 1.25 miles like it was last year. So there are changes all the time. I don't know that no matter how old school or how much of a hard boot you are from the past, I'm not sure. You look at basketball, they put in a 3-point stripe. How much did that change the dynamic of the game? You got 60 shots being chucked up by a team that can't draw iron on 45 of them. And so I think it is time for a change after the racehorse of the very same name. And I wouldn't mind at all if they instituted that. And it would only enhance, I think, interest in thoroughbred racing. You're not going to lose anybody's attention if you wait another week before you run the Preakness after the Derby and then subsequently have 3 weeks before the Belmont Stakes. So wake up, horse racing people. Now, that's an interesting race. I had an interview yesterday with Umberto Rispoli, who's going to be riding the favorite journalism in the Preakness. Only a field of 9 this time. Rispoli rode, I thought, a pretty good race. He ran into various problems during the Kentucky Derby. Looked like he was going to find his way to the winner's circle, was engaged by Sovereignty inside the quarter pole, somewhere, about between a quarter pole and a 16 pole. And you could see that the momentum was all with Sovereignty, who goes on and wins the race by like a length and a half. Rispoli actually admitted on the show, and you can catch that, it's on Bleacher Brothers, And the show's called Conversations. We had Umberto on the show and also Larry Colmus, who's calling the races for NBC. And Umberto admitted he pulled like a bit of a shoemaker there in the Derby and stood up maybe a step before the wire. Now, he was already beaten. He was not going to win the race, but he nearly blew the place to the fast-closing Baeza, who, interestingly, is also bypassing the Preakness. And you would think, based on that close, that Baez is going to be a huge factor if he runs in the Belmont Stakes, even once again at 1.25 miles. But at 1.5 miles, if you could get the distance by pedigree or dosage or whatever indicators you look at, you would have to think that horse was going to be really tough to beat. He was flying at the finish there to complete the trifecta. But Pete Rose Hall of Fame, can you bet on it? And if you had in the past, have you already torn up your tickets, or are they somehow has a statute of limitations expired on your Pete Rose Hall of Fame tickets? To the point where even now, after his death, he checked out last September, that they're not valid anymore. I would imagine there'll be some kind of betting line on that to see whether he gets into the Hall of Fame or not. And brought up once again an ugly and overwhelmingly overdone debate about whether or not he belongs in the Hall of Fame. All right, we had some baskets last night. We did say that Indiana getting 7.5 was probably the play, and it didn't look so swift. I was talking to a friend of mine during the game. He said, didn't you give out Indiana plus 7.5 yesterday on that Bury Your Bookie show? I said, yeah, just I think Cleveland is not playing nearly as well as they did in the Heat series. They had a couple of guys come back from injury. It looked to me like Donovan Mitchell was going to be tiring badly. Indiana, an underestimated team, nearly made it into the final round last year. They ended up losing to the Celtics, Eastern Conference Finals. Didn't have a great regular season, but it was good enough to be the 4th seed. And sure enough, they prevail and knock a lot of people out of cashing on any kind of NBA playoff ticket, because I thought the Cavs were going to win the East. I figured they would beat the Celtics and they would be in there with a shot against whoever emerged from the West, which appears to be Oklahoma City. That was a good ball game last night. So if you took the two dogs, I wasn't sure what to do about the Oklahoma City game, because there's always the possibility, the way that Jokic was shooting the ball so inconsistently, that he wasn't going to have another one of those monster games where he puts up 40-some-odd points. And if he was going to go 0 for 12 or whatever from three-point range, that Denver had the possibility to lose by double digits on the road. They did manage to cover. It was very competitive all the way. They blew an 11-point lead that they had established towards the end of the second quarter. That got whittled down to 2. Then they reestablished a big lead later in the game and ended up losing going away, but not by enough to cover for the bookies, who were according you 10.5 points, 112-105 the final there. And they'll be very, very speculative as to what happens in Game 6 in that series. But the pivotal Game 5, as they like to call it, goes to the Oklahoma City Thunder. And now back to Denver for Game 6, where we know the Nuggets are tough, but they certainly showed that they're worthy of going toe-to-toe with Oklahoma City. And if they're accorded a bunch of points at home, be very tempting to go ahead and take the points. And then the Pistons, or rather the Pacers, 114-105, they clinched the series in 5 over Cleveland. And the 7.5 looked like a very, very generous allotment. So we come to tonight. You have the New York Knicks, Boston Celtics. Knicks getting 4.5 points, going to the TD Garden. And the Celtics now playing without Jason Tatum, who did rupture his Achilles, had surgery, likely out all of next season. We might not see this guy until 2026. Now, the thing is, and Scotty M referenced this yesterday, the Celtics, you would think right away, if you're a bettor, no Tatum, and the Knicks have won 3 out of 4. I'm going to go ahead and bury it, getting 4.5 with the New York Knicks tonight, but not so fast. You have to take into account that the Celtics are 9-2 in games where they haven't had Jason Tatum in the lineup. 11 occasions they go to the post, and they're 9-2 in those contests. So maybe a little bit of trepidation there, but naturally my first inclination, you're thinking at home the Celtics find a way to rally and maybe win this game. Do they win by 4.5? 3 things can happen. The Knicks can win outright, which is certainly a possibility. They could make it a close game. It could be a battle back and forth. And or the Celtics could get into one of those blowout modes, even though they don't have a guy in the lineup who scored 42 points before he got hurt in the previous game at Madison Square Garden. So my early lean on that one will be just go ahead and take the points. Don't let your eyes not be your guideline, and don't be deceived by what seems to be an oddball betting line. And I'm thinking that the Knicks playing it tough, sensing, smelling the finish line, seeing now that they're not even going to have to face the Cavaliers, who they were horrible against during the regular season. Remember, that was the big thing going into the postseason that, the Knicks never beat any good teams. They were 0-8 against Cleveland, Boston, and OKC. Maybe they make amends for that tonight and can kind of smell the finish. So I'd be inclined to take the 4.5 with the New York Knicks. And Golden State getting 11 from Minnesota. It's been a little surprising to me, especially in the games without Steph Curry in the lineup, how Minnesota has sort of struggled to establish their level of superiority. They became kind of a wise guy favorite team after they got out of the first round and beat the Los Angeles Lakers. And you thought, wow, this Minnesota team is really maturing and coming on. But I don't know that they've displayed all of that savvy in their triumphs, even being up 3-1 over Golden State. So do you take the plus 11? That one I'm going to leave to you guys. But yeah, it certainly looks like a fat number there. And you could see Minnesota closing them out. But being on the road and Golden State getting 11 points, no Steph Curry, might be tempting to think that you slide into some kind of a backdoor cover situation where maybe they're down 15 or 16 going to the fourth quarter. Minnesota sends the scrubs in there. The lead whittles down to 7 or 8. And you might be able to cash a ticket there, getting 11 points with Golden State. Certainly taking the underdogs has been a very favorable position throughout the NBA playoffs, which is usually anything but the case. So I think you're looking again at why buck the trend? Just go ahead, take the points in both games, and hope you come out on top. Well, we'll get into the PGA Championship a little bit more on the show tomorrow. You have some interesting prices. Of course, prohibitive favorites with Scotty Scheffler plus 450, Rory McIlroy plus 475. Reason to bet McIlroy? I think he has 4 titles at Quail Hollow, where the PGA Championship is being contested. He's won 4 times there. So horses for courses. McIlroy seems to fit the bill, playing great golf so far this year. No reason to believe that he won't be effective there. Maybe you're taking him as a top 10 guy, but you're going to have to lay a price on that proposition. Plus 475, though. I can't bet a golfer in any of these major events that doesn't at least have double-digit odds. Whatever level of certainty you have, there are too many variables to go ahead and take Scotty Scheffler at 4-1. He was great a couple of weeks ago when he ran away and won a tournament by 10 strokes. Playing great all year long after coming back from that mysterious O.J. Simpson-like hand cut that he suffered when he was trying to cut some roast beef with a wine bottle. But he's not been obviously as good as he was last year with the 9 tournament wins. It doesn't mean that he won't come close to that by the end of the season. I can't take him at plus 450. He can go ahead and win without my money. It's kind of like when you're seeing a 3 to 5 shot in a race. Guy says who you're betting, and you think the 3 to 5 shot appears to be on paper unbeatable, but you're going Harvey Pack on that and saying I can't bet a 3 to 5 shot. Not a man alive can make a living at 3 to 5. So I consider that like a 3 to 5 price on Scotty Scheffler. Who's interesting though? The Shambo always seems to come to the surface in these tournaments, but he's only plus 850. So you have a few guys that might break through. I was surprised by the performance of John Rahm in the Masters. He looked like he was going to be out of it early on, and he actually came back strongly in that one to compete. Brooks Koepka, what's going on with him? The guy with the teeth that looks like Secretariat, speaking of the Triple Crown. 40-1 on Koepka. Can he bounce back? He was not bad in the first couple of rounds in the Masters, as I recall, and then kind of fell apart, but I don't know, a determined cat might be worth a sniff at 40-1. And Shane Lowry, who just got beat in this Truist Championship by Sepp Straka, who we had recommended, I think, as a Masters player, like 55 or 60-1. Not too bad. I mean, you're getting a good price on a guy who's always consistent in these majors, performs very well under this kind of pressure. Shane Lowry, 45-1, and he's trimmed down a little bit. He doesn't have that big Irish gut that he had. So 45-1, not a bad price. And then, of course, in honor of the professor who joins us every Friday, do we have to take a little sniff at 90-1 on Justin Rose? So if you throw $20 there, you get back 1,800. And as we've been saying, the beauty of betting golf is you only have to be right once in a while, as long as you're not betting the chalk and beating the Milk of Magnesia drum. And so if you catch this guy one time, look, your next 90 bets are free on the house. I think you could probably find another winner in there if you bet the next 90 majors. So those are our recommendations. Stay away from the chalk. If they win, congratulate the people that had money on Scotty Scheffler and Rory McIlroy. I'm going to go ahead and put a couple of bucks on Koepka, Lowry, And of course, at 90-1, Justin Rose. All right, we'll have more on that tomorrow with Mike Jones. He's a big golf guy, so we'll try and handicap the tournament a little bit for you there. Very happy to have been with you on this fine Wednesday edition. Guys, good luck out there tonight. As I said, NBA action. We're going with the Dogs, and you do have a big game, 2 games on tap in the NHL. Florida Panthers, Toronto Maple Leafs. Getting a price laying a goal and a half with the Florida Panthers. You're getting plus 179. Not a bad choice. I think they have an excellent chance to win the game. A goal and a half. Maybe you have to pray for an empty netter later on. All these games have been tight. But plus 179 probably be where my money is with the Florida Panthers tonight. And Edmonton and Vegas. Edmonton just happens to be on a roll. Edmonton leading that series 3-1. So the Las Vegas Golden Knights, the proverbial backs to the wall. I don't know who. I mean, can Edmonton continue this hot play? They've been outstanding. I thought Vegas had a good chance to win the series, but shows you how much I know about hockey. Not exactly Don Cherry, even though I followed it my whole life, going back to the 6-team league. So good luck with that one. We're going to leave you on your own there. And if we're as lucky as we were last night, getting 7.5 with the Indiana Pacers for an outright money line win, that's a nice score. What is that, like 3-1? If you're betting, maybe even higher. The Indiana Pacers on the money line, that had to be a very profitable venture if you thought they were going to win that game. So let's hope we can luck out tonight, get the points with both Golden State, who could just as easily get blown out, but I don't think they will. And taking a 4.5 because of the variables and possibilities, I think they have a chance to win the game outright, have a chance to make the game close. And I don't know if it's an equal chance, but it wouldn't be any huge surprise if somehow they laid down like dogs and got blown out in this ball game and lost by 5+. But I'm going to go ahead and think that the points and play like the points are a very attractive proposition. All right, good luck, everybody. Thanks so much for being with us. Pete Rose, Hall of Famer. Can you bet that right now? We'll have to get the line on that, and we'll bring it to you tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time on the next edition of Bury Your Bookie.